Alright, we're going to waste very little time jumping into this video. This video is going to be for Sequoia owners or prospective Sequoia owners. This is going to be my list of 10 things that you really kind of need to know if you're going to own one of these vehicles. Things that I've learned over the last couple of years that have been helpful to me and hopefully will be helpful to you too. This video isn't supposed to be just a big long list of criticisms for the Sequoia. It's just going to be a few things that you kind of need to know and might be helpful for you as you own this vehicle. Alright, now one weird little thing about the Sequoia, and I failed to mention this when I did a video talking about LED headlight bulb installation, and that is that even if you have a little decoder on your LED headlight bulbs, like we added in that video, one of the things that won't actually be quite the same is the way the daylight running lamps function. And basically, your headlights will basically always continually be on once you switch to LED headlight bulbs. And there's a really easy fix to that. That fix is right here. Right next to the battery on the driver's side, there's this little tiny plug right here. And it's really quite easy to just slide a little flathead screwdriver in that plug and unplug it and just leave it. And after you've done that, when you're using the little headlight switch here, when you put it in this position, the daylight running lamps will turn on as normal. So if you live in a state where that's required, then you can remain legal. And then turning it all the way up will turn your headlights on just as if it were in its stock configuration. And this is important because if you leave those headlights running all the time, when it's in a low voltage mode, basically it'll burn out your LED headlight bulbs in just a few months. So you definitely want to make sure you unplug that little switch and you'll be good to go. Now, one item that's going to be a little bit difficult to show here is going to be the lower ball joints. You might know, if you're familiar with Toyotas in general from about this age, they do have a pretty common issue with the lower ball joints. They've been known to kind of snap off and your wheel comes off at an inopportune time. So my recommendation is, if you buy one of these vehicles and you know it hasn't been replaced, then make sure you just go ahead and replace it with an OEM part. I would not go aftermarket on those. They're a little bit expensive, but it'll give you some peace of mind. It's a pretty easy job to do yourself. It takes maybe 30 minutes per side if you're pretty skilled. Once again, this is another difficult thing to show on camera, but one of the things you should pretty much immediately add as soon as you buy one of these vehicles, especially if you're going to be doing some, like, off-road backcountry travel, is go ahead and do the diff breather mod. So this is pretty common with most solid axle vehicles, is that basically the little diff breather on these vehicles sits at the very top of the diff up here. And if you go through some deep water, if you don't have the diff breather, I guess, relocated, these vehicles have been known to, I guess, they basically get water all in the axle seals, the axle, the diff, and then you can have some pretty serious issues down the line. I've actually heard that really and truly most of the time that water gets pulled through the axle seals on the wheel. But if you buy a little diff breather kit, which, by the way, I've got a link for in the description, basically it's just a little kit that'll give you a little hose and you can reroute the diff breather to a higher location of the vehicle. It's a real easy thing to do. Plenty of videos out there showing you how to do it. This next one is pretty simple and straightforward, and that is going to be the four-wheel drive modes and primarily the little diff lock button. And I'm not going to go into really any detail at all about how it works, but it's good to know how it works. And the nice thing is that I've got a video explaining all about it, so make sure you go check that out. Now, this next item is a little bit weird. It has to do with the key fob. So in this vehicle, if you lock it and walk away, and maybe you come back and unlock it again, but don't lock it this time, it will actually automatically lock when it detects that the key fob has traveled a certain amount of distance away from the vehicle. It's kind of a weird little feature. I guess Toyota did it for security reasons, but I found that sometimes, I guess maybe because of battery levels in the fob, or maybe just the vehicle's old, it doesn't accurately know how far away the key fob is at times, and I've known it to automatically lock while I've been sitting inside the car with the key fob in my hand, which is kind of concerning because that tells me that it could potentially lock with you outside the vehicle. It could lock you out. So I don't know how to disable this feature. If anybody knows, please tell me how to do it because I'd love to do it. Okay, now one weird thing that I've noticed, and it seems to be related to when my battery gets disconnected and the vehicle kind of resets. For some reason, after I do that, sometimes the little button here for controlling the rear window doesn't work after that. Really kind of an odd thing. And then also the rear window defroster won't work. But I found that there's actually just kind of a way to reset that system. And that is basically you just, make sure you've got the vehicle turned on and you press the button upwards and hold it, I think for maybe 10 or 15 seconds. You'll hear it click. And once it clicks, the window will work and the defroster will work as well. So yeah, kind of a weird thing. Kind of freaked me out when we first bought this car and the window wouldn't work, but turns out there's a really easy fix for it. I'm not going to dwell on this one very much because this one is very well known, but the rear hatch handle on these breaks all the time. It's just something to keep in mind that you're likely going to have to do if you have one of these vehicles for a certain amount of time. I will say, I don't think the problem is quite as bad as people make it out to be. I've always tried to be gentle with ours, and in the year and about 9 months or so that we've owned this, we're still on the same one, and we've not had to replace it yet. So not a huge deal, but just something to keep in mind. And it wouldn't hurt to maybe familiarize yourself with some videos on how to fix it in the event that you need to. This is another pretty well-known problem with these vehicles, and it's pretty common amongst many Toyotas of about the same age. And that is going to be frame rust issues. Now, we got lucky with ours. I can't prove this, but I'm pretty confident based on uh, how ours appears. I'm pretty sure it was replaced under the factory recall. So, yeah, most, or not most, but many of these have had them replaced under that recall, which is very nice. So if you can find one of those, you're in great shape. Ours also lived most of its life in Virginia and Georgia before we bought it, so that's also very helpful. But if you do have one of these, this is really one of those things just to check on before you buy it. Very easy to check to make sure the frame isn't completely rotted out. They're all going to have a little bit of surface rust. And if you do live in a place where the roads get salted frequently, kind of like we do here in Utah, Colorado, or anywhere in the salt belt, as it's called, it's recommended that you just rinse the frame off, and the whole car for that matter, off pretty much any time after you get a little snow, get a little salt on the road. And it wouldn't be a bad idea to maybe look into some undercoating options on these too, just because they're a little bit more likely to develop rust. Another pretty common issue I see on Sequoias is that they have a issue with their traction control system. You'll see the little lights pop up on the dash for VSC, track. Those types of lights will pop up on the dash, and generally there's a pretty easy fix for them. A lot of the times it's just going to be the wheel speed sensors. I'm not going to demonstrate this in this video, but it's pretty easy to just pop off a tire, lift up the vehicle, take off a tire, and these little wheel speed sensors, they just have like one little bolt holding them in, really easy to access and to change out. The price of getting one from Toyota is pretty expensive, but the aftermarket ones I've purchased to fix our traction control system have worked great, so I don't see a problem with buying those aftermarket. It's also possible that you just need to take off those wheel speed sensors and clean them off. A lot of the times they'll just get like some dirt, mud, and stuff in there, and if you clean it off, it'll work perfectly after that. So that's a pretty easy fix. There's also a thing called a 0-point calibration for these vehicles, and it's basically just kind of a way of resetting the vehicle's gyroscopic information, the way it understands the leveling of the vehicle and the traction control system. It's kind of a weird thing. I'm not going to tell you how to do it because personally I don't really know myself, but there's lots of information on it. If you just search Toyota Sequoia 0-point calibration, you'll find some information on how to do it, and from what I understand, it's pretty easy to do on your own. Now, one little irritating thing is that if your traction control system isn't working entirely the way you want it to, it's possible that it might cut power on you when you don't want it to, and there's a way of completely overriding the traction control system altogether and it's a really, really easy thing to do, and I'll show it to you now. So in the event your traction control system is giving you issues and maybe you don't have the opportunity to fix it, maybe you just need a quick little fix to get by, make the vehicle a little bit easier to drive. It's pretty simple. Basically, you're just going to go to the brake master cylinder here, and there's going to be a little plug right here, and you're just going to squeeze it and unplug it. And those lights will still be on the dash, obviously, but basically the vehicle will not cut power or do anything like that. I wouldn't recommend this as a long-term fix because you're going to miss out on some nice things like A-Track if you're doing some more intense off-roading. And I'm not sure if I can confirm this, but I would imagine doing this would disable your ABS. So I would not recommend this as a long-term solution, but just if you need to get by for a little bit, this is an easy thing to do. Now, this last item is probably the only thing that I'm genuinely disappointed with in our Toyota Sequoia, and that is going to be the peeling paint. Oh, it's not been good on ours. And our 2007 Highlander is really similar. So I don't know if other people with Sequoias report this as a common thing, but yeah, the paint, at least the clear coat on ours, it's been kind of an issue. We're, looking for an option as far as, maybe getting that fixed by a paint shop. It doesn't apply to just the clear coat in this case. Also, you'll notice that our little pinstripe detail here is starting to peel off on one side. So that's not entirely great. So these vehicles are awesome, super reliable, as I've discussed in many other videos, but this is one little thing that irritates me just a little bit. And that wraps up the video regarding 10 things you ought to know about your Toyota Sequoia. If you're new to our channel, my wife and I explored the state of Utah and beyond in our wonderful 2007 Sequoia. So if you're interested in Sequoias or maybe overlanding travel, SUV camping, anything related to that, you ought to subscribe to stick around, and we'll see you in the next one.